The security badge hit the marble floor with a sharp sound that echoed through the quiet lobby, and in that moment everything in Armin's life seemed to fall with it. A single email had erased 10 years of loyalty in less than a minute. As he stood there holding the cardboard box that carried the small pieces of his life, an old photo of his daughter, a worn notebook, and a coffee mug with a crack along the rim, he realized that the job he had depended on to keep his family afloat was gone. And far above him, in a glass office overlooking the city, the CEO who had signed the order had no idea she had just fired the one person who could save her collapsing company. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of people who refuse to give up, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel Lonely Dad Strong Heart. Your support keeps these stories alive. The morning had started like any other for Armin, except for the quiet worry that had been growing inside him for weeks. His daughter had been sick recently, the bills were piling up, and every day felt like a fragile balance between hope and exhaustion. He was the kind of father who woke up before sunrise just to make sure breakfast was ready before school and who stayed late at work without complaining because every extra hour meant a little more security for the only family he had left. Life had not been gentle with him. After losing his wife years earlier, he had promised himself that no matter how hard things became, he would never let his daughter feel the weight of the world pressing on their small apartment. But the company he worked for had changed. The atmosphere that once felt like a team slowly turned into something colder, something driven by numbers rather than people. New leadership had arrived with bold promises and ruthless efficiency. Among them was the new CEO, a woman named Elena, known across the industry for turning failing companies into powerful empires. She was respected, feared, and admired all at once. Yet in her mission to cut losses and rebuild quickly, she relied heavily on reports, performance charts, and recommendations from executives who rarely noticed the quiet employees who held everything together behind the scenes. Armin was one of those quiet employees. He worked in systems maintenance and internal infrastructure, a role that rarely received attention but was essential to keeping operations stable. Over the years, he had quietly solved problems others didn't even realize existed. He had built backup protocols, strengthened fragile parts of the company's network, and often stayed late fixing issues before they could become disasters. But his contributions were buried under reports that only measured visible performance metrics, not the silent prevention of failure. That morning, the layoffs had come suddenly. A list generated by consultants and approved within minutes. Departments trimmed. Positions eliminated. Names crossed out without stories attached to them. Armin's name was one of them. As he stepped outside the building with the box in his hands, the sky looked unusually heavy, as if it understood the weight he carried inside his chest. His thoughts drifted immediately to his daughter waiting at home, unaware that the stability she trusted had just disappeared. The fear wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and suffocating, like a slow storm building behind his ribs. Meanwhile, inside the towering office building, Elena believed she had made the right decision. The company had been bleeding money, and investors were impatient. She had spent weeks studying charts and forecasts, pushing herself through sleepless nights trying to make decisions that would save hundreds of jobs in the long run. To her, layoffs were painful but necessary. She told herself that leadership meant carrying that burden without hesitation. But later that same afternoon, something unexpected began to unfold. The company's central operations system started to fail. At first it looked like a small technical glitch. Servers slowed down, internal tools stopped syncing properly, and several automated processes began to collapse one after another. Within hours, departments were unable to access critical data. Deliveries were delayed. Clients began sending urgent emails. The situation quickly escalated into a crisis that threatened to cost the company millions. Engineers rushed into meeting rooms filled with screens and flashing alerts. Executives spoke rapidly, trying to understand what was happening. Elena watched as confusion spread across the room, and for the first time since she became CEO, uncertainty crept into her confidence. What no one realized at that moment was that many of the invisible safeguards protecting the company had been quietly maintained by the very person who had walked out with a cardboard box earlier that day. Armin had built systems that weren't fully documented because he had developed them over years of responding to real problems in real time. He understood the company's infrastructure like someone who had lived inside it, learning every weakness and every hidden strength. Without him there, the systems were like a house missing the one person who knew how to keep the lights from going out during a storm. As the hours passed, the crisis deepened. Major clients began threatening to withdraw contracts. The financial projections Elena had worked so hard to stabilize were suddenly collapsing again, faster than before. It was during a tense late evening meeting that someone finally mentioned Armin's name. One of the senior engineers, exhausted and frustrated, explained that several critical fail-safes had been managed by him. Not because it was in his job description, but because he had cared enough to keep improving things even when no one asked him to. The room went silent as the realization spread. Elena felt a cold wave of regret rising inside her. She had signed off on his termination just hours earlier. For a moment, she stared at the report in front of her, realizing that the neat rows of numbers had hidden something important. Leadership, she thought, wasn't just about cutting costs or making bold moves. It was about understanding people, the ones who didn't speak loudly but carried enormous responsibility quietly. And now, the company was paying the price for overlooking one of them. That night, Elena left the office building long after the city lights had dimmed. The streets were quieter than usual, and for the first time in weeks she wasn't thinking about strategy or investors. She was thinking about the man she had never really noticed before making a decision that changed his life. At the same time, in a small apartment across town, Armin sat at a worn kitchen table reviewing his savings, calculating how long he could keep things stable before everything started to fall apart. His daughter was asleep in the next room, unaware of the storm that had entered their lives that day. He looked at the photograph beside him and reminded himself of the promise he had made years ago: no matter what happened, he would find a way forward. The next morning brought an unexpected knock at his door. Elena had spent the entire night reviewing reports and speaking with engineers. The more she learned, the clearer it became that Armin's knowledge wasn't just helpful, it was crucial. But more than that, something deeper had begun to shift inside her. She realized that in her race to rebuild the company, she had overlooked the human foundation that made it possible. When the door opened, the moment was heavy with unspoken reality. One life had been shaken, and another had been forced to confront a mistake that could define her leadership. The truth was simple but powerful: the struggling father she had fired was the company's last hope. The days that followed became a turning point not only for the company but for everyone involved. Armin returned, not with pride or anger, but with quiet determination. The same determination that had pushed him through sleepless nights caring for his daughter and long hours fixing systems no one noticed. He worked alongside the team, guiding them through complex solutions, rebuilding stability piece by piece like someone repairing a bridge while standing in the middle of a storm. The company slowly recovered. Systems stabilized. Clients regained confidence. Investors stepped back from the edge of panic. But something else changed as well. Elena began to see leadership differently. She started listening more, observing more, understanding that sometimes the strongest pillars of an organization are the people who never ask to be recognized. And Armin, despite everything he had endured, proved something powerful to everyone around him: that resilience is often born from love, responsibility, and the quiet refusal to give up. Before we reach the ending of this story, I have a special request for you. In the comments, write the word hope if you believe that even in the hardest moments, life can turn around when people choose empathy and second chances. Months later, the company was no longer on the verge of collapse. It was stronger than before, but now it carried a different culture, one that valued people, not just numbers. Elena often thought about the day she nearly lost the person who held everything together. It became a lesson she would never forget. For Armin, life didn't magically become perfect, but something meaningful had changed. Stability returned to his home, his daughter's laughter filled their apartment again, and the fear that once sat quietly in his chest slowly faded into something else: quiet pride. Not because he had saved a company, but because he had never stopped trying when life pushed him to the edge. And sometimes, the most powerful heroes are not the ones standing in bright offices making decisions, but the ones walking out of buildings with a cardboard box, still choosing hope for the people waiting for them at home. If this story touched your heart even a little, Please like the video, share it with someone who might need encouragement today, and subscribe to Lonely Dad's Strong Heart to support more emotional stories like this. Your engagement helps these messages of hope reach more people who might be going through difficult times right now.